Apples and pecans, the perfect combination for this delicious pie. Let me show you how I made this apple pecan pie. So I used about 4 medium Granny Smith apples. I peeled them and chopped them into small pieces. And here I'm going to show you what I did to the filling. I'm using a little bit of lemon juice. Those are my apples that I chopped up. This is about a pound of apples. And I'm going to add some lemon juice. The lemon juice is going to give it a bit of freshness, and it's also going to prevent the apples from getting too brown. So I went ahead and I added about 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. You can add more if you like as well. I'm using my brown sugar substitute. In this case, it's Sucrin Gold, and it's very, very similar to the Truvia brown sugar blend. So if you don't have Sucrin Gold, you can use the brown sugar blend from Truvia, or you can use any sweetener of your choice for that matter. I'm going to be adding cinnamon as well, a good amount, about a tablespoon. If you want to add a little bit of nutmeg, you can do so as well. I did not. Cinnamon was all I used here. And now with my hands, I'm just going to combine or kind of rub the apples with this delicious cinnamon sugar mixture. I also added a pinch of salt to the apples. And I'm just making sure that they are completely coated. Now I put these on the stove top and I cook them on low to medium heat for about 10 to 12 minutes. And before I turned on my stove, I went ahead and I added some xanthan gum. This is going to thicken up the mixture as it cooks. Added about a 1/4 cup of water. And that was just in the bowl with the cinnamon sugar. So I went ahead and added that, and I cooked it covered for about 10 to 12 minutes. And there's what they look like. You can see they're still keeping their shape, the apples. That's why I love using Granny Smith apples. And the mixture is a little bit thick from the xanthan gum. So now we're going to set this aside and let it cool. And you guys can use more apples if you'd like. In the interest of keeping this pie reduced sugar, I went ahead and only used a pound, but that's up to you. Now here I'm going to show you how I made my crust. It's a coconut flour based crust, and I added some sweetener as well as a pinch of salt. And that's my butter. I'm just showing you that it's very small cubes and it's very cold. I added some pecans, and the pecans I just put them in the food processor and made them as small as possible to add to the crust. And this is going to give it an amazing flavor, and it's also going to give it a nice texture. Make sure your oven is preheated at 350 degrees in the meantime. And I'm just greasing my pie plate. You can do this with butter, you can use coconut oil, or just a nonstick spray. This is going to make it easier for us to take our slices out once we want to serve the pie. So put that aside. Now we're going to put the pie crust together. I have 2 eggs and a little bit of vanilla as well as some olive oil in there. So just throw in your butter. This has to be very cold butter, so right out of the fridge, and just coat it a little bit with your hands. And I'm just using a fork here to get it started. If you have one of those fancy cutters, pastry cutters, you can use that as well. But the fork works really good just to get it started. And then you're going to use your hands. Get your hands in there. Because what you're doing when you're using your hands, you're rubbing the butter against the coconut flour. And that way you can feel the texture that you're getting with the dough. And you don't want to overdo this because you don't want the pieces of butter to start melting. They are going to inevitably melt a little bit because your hands are always going to be warm. But you still want to keep the texture in there. So you want it to be kind of sandy. And once you see that most of the butter is rubbed in, then you're going to want to stop doing that. Otherwise, you're going to melt all of the butter, and you don't want that. You want this to add to the flakiness of the dough. So that's what it looks like. Now you're going to go ahead and add your eggs with the vanilla and the olive oil. And with your fork, you're just going to go ahead and combine it. And as you can see, it starts becoming a dough, just like a pie dough. Once you see that there's no more dry pieces in the bowl, then you can go ahead and put your fork down and use your hands once again, because your hands are your best tools, and it's going to give you an idea of the texture and the feel of the dough. So there you go. All I did was I lightly patted them together, and there's your dough. You can see, looks just like regular pie dough, and it smells delicious. Now, ultimately, I'm sure that you can, if you wanted to roll out this pie dough like you do with traditional pie dough, you could just use 2 pieces of parchment papers and roll the dough in the middle. But honestly, to me, this is just so much easier, just patting the dough inside the pie pan, and it's a lot more fun as well. So you can make just a single bottom layer if you'd like, and then fill the pie, and then use the rest of the dough to put on top, like kind of like a crumble. You can do that as well. That's another option. But what I did was I went ahead and I covered the entire pie pan, just tried to make it as even as possible on the bottom and the sides. And you can see there's enough crust to even make like a pretty design on your pie if you wanted to do that on the crust on the top. Just doing that. You can also use your fork if you want to, just to give it a different look. You don't have to, but it just makes it look so much prettier. And again, make sure your oven is preheated to 350 degrees, because we are going to put this pie crust in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes to pre-bake before we fill it with the apples. And it's just about ready. You also want to use your fork just to prick on the bottom of the dough, so as it bakes without the filling, it doesn't puff up too much. That's what I did here. All right, so my filling is still warm, but cool enough, and my pie pan with my pie crust has been out of the oven for about 10 minutes, and it's also cooled. Now what I'm doing here is I'm adding more pecans, because after all, it is an apple pecan pie. So you're gonna add those chopped up pecans to the apple mixture that we cooked earlier. And you can add as much as you'd like. I added about another 1/4 cup. So the more pecan taste you want, the more pecans you want to add. I wanted to kind of keep the balance because I still wanted to, of course, taste the apples. So once you have combined that, you're going to just go ahead and pour the filling inside the pie crust. And your oven should still be at 350. And what you want to do is you want to watch it and make sure that you're not burning your pie crust. It's very easy to do that on the edges that are exposed. So once you put the pie in the oven, what I did was I baked it for about 20 minutes on the top rack. And then I lowered the temperature to about 325, and I moved the pie to the bottom rack. And I didn't have to cover the tops of the pie. You could. They sell these really fancy looking things that cover the entire edges of your pie pan. If you want to do that, you can, or use aluminum foil. I didn't do that. I just went ahead and make sure that I lowered the temperature and then brought the pie pan to the bottom rack. And that worked perfect for me. So there you see it in the oven. Smells delicious. And here it is. There's that first slice, and I tasted that. I had with some whipped cream. Delicious, you guys. I hope you make this recipe and share it with others. Enjoy. Thanks for watching.